Welcome, listeners, to the Grande Bouffe, the Big Feast, with myself, Cole Smithey, and this week's secret co-host, mystery co-host, we're going to talk about in just 1 second. As always, we're here to copiously consume international politics and culture through the prism of a single film and a different craft beer. And this week's guest co-host, Mr. Josh Bogatin. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, nice to be here.
So, Josh comes to us through Jeremy Workman. If you listened to our Jeremy Workman podcast, you can look it up if you didn't, but he has a documentary coming out called The World Beneath Your Feet, for which Josh helped edit because he works at Wheelhouse, and so he works with Jeremy editing, and they have a new movie documentary that he's working on, but he is also a curator for Spectacle Cinema in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. Spectacle Theater, I suppose.
Spectacle Theater,
yeah. So tell us about Wheelhouse and what you do with Spectacle.
So Spectacle Theater is a micro cinema in Williamsburg. So it's small, it's only 30 seats, and it's only $5 for the movies. And our motto is that we show lost and forgotten films. And that's basically, it's very low budget, so what we get is kind of like what we can afford to get, which is what it's on the kind of margins of cinema. So very like obscure movies, grindhouse films, experimental movies, and right now I have a series there that I programmed on Mark Rappaport, who he did Rock Hudson's Home Movies and the Journals of Jean Seberg, which is video essays from the 90s.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I love Jean Seberg. It was such a crazy story about her.
Yeah.
About how she died in her car in Paris.
Yeah.
Wow, that's super interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the series is on kind of some narrative films he also did in the 70s. And I also do a bi-weekly series called Fist Church, which is a surprise mystery kung fu film. So it's every other Sunday at 3, and
that's at Spectacle Theater?
Yeah, at Spectacle Theater in Williamsburg.
Cool.
And I'd show mystery kung fu film. I did Pedicab Driver the other week.
I've seen that. I saw that at Metrograph a couple years ago. That's an amazing movie. Mm-hmm. It's so good.
Yeah. I show Troy Harg, Lau Kar Long, just whatever. It's a mystery, so it's fun. Yeah, you should come out.
And it's only $5?
Yeah, it's only $5 per ticket.
That's great.
Yeah, it's like a third of whatever any other theater would cost you these days.
So we were talking before, and you guys have this like punk rock kind of thing where you give the filmmaker or the distribution company like a third of the door.
Yeah. So basically, how we run is that what we get our movies and we give the distributor or the filmmaker a third of the door. And since the movies are only $5, so that's like kind of conceivably very little. So, like sometimes it's basically kind of like lunch money, but
yeah,
it's just like kind of how it runs. And it I think it works well in our case, and kind of like pushing us to pick movies that like nowhere else would really play, because that's all we can afford. Yeah.
I love that. That's so. It's great for building community. I'm sure you have a lot of regulars that show up for that stuff.
Yeah, we have people who they'll see like 60, 70 movies there a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean it's like affordable and.
So what subway stop are you near?
Right off of Bedford, L. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And Marcy, JM.
How much of a walk is it from the subway?
It's about like 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so like 7-8 blocks.
Yeah, exactly.
Something
yeah,
like
it's on South 3rd Street and Bedford. So.
All right. What's the address?
123 South 3rd, 123 South.
All right, you heard it here. Of course, you can use our friend Google to dial up Spectacle Theater. But for a $5 movie, I mean, I would say if somebody's coming, if you're coming to New York as a tourist and you want to do something cool, like really like insidery, cinemaphile cool,
yeah,
dial that shit up, man.
Yeah, kind of like real old school New York.
Exactly.
Not
Exactly.
Like,
yeah, none of this corporate bullshit.
Yeah, not like the kind of bougie like Metrograph, like $7 Pocky and like $10 popcorn.
Yeah. All right, so I also want to hear about what you're doing with Jeremy, because we love Jeremy Workman. We got to get him back on the podcast soon. So I want to know about what you're doing. I know you're working on a new documentary with him.
Yeah, I'm working on a documentary about this domino artist, YouTube domino artist Havesh 5. So she makes kind of giant domino, like kind of like Rube Goldberg kind of contraptions, and like art, and she knocks them all down. And they come into giant like pictures, and yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
And what's her name?
Havesh 5.
Oh, Havesh 5. That's an interesting moniker to go by.
Yeah, it's her last name, and she's the 5th child of her family. So
cool.
Yeah.
When's that going to come out?
Probably in another year or so. Yeah.
And of course, you worked on The World Beneath Your Feet, which I'm personally really excited to see. What's the guy's name who walked all over New York?
Matt Green. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's walked every single block in New York. He's kind of like a very kind of nomadic person. He doesn't really have a job. He just he cat sits and drifts from place to place and spends like less than $5 a day, and his whole life is just walking around New York, and he's walked every single block. So
how did he get hooked up with Jeremy, or how did Jeremy discover him?
I'm actually not sure. I don't know. It's kind of Jeremy just kind of knows
knows people.
Yeah, this kind of circle of like.
I know. I got a guy for that.
Yeah. I got a guy who's walked every block. Yeah.
When's that coming out?
That's coming out. There's not a set release date yet, but November. Yeah.
Okay. Is it shown any film festivals yet?
Yeah, it was at South by Southwest.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That was recent.
Mm-hmm.
That was when is that? In May or June?
It's March. Yeah.
Oh, March. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the beer real quick. It's an old favorite. Anybody who comes to the Upper East Side, if you go to Annie's on Lexington between 88th and 89th, you can walk right in and pick yourself up a bottle of the Truth for $3. Mm-hmm. It's an Imperial IPA from Flying Dog, one of my faves. And this is an Imperial IPA, my favorite style, nice and bitter IPA, 8.7, so it's got a good kick. You get a good buzz, and you're feeling good. And this is hopefully the last hot day of New York weather. I'm really looking forward to fall. I know Josh is a big fan of summer.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of summer. I'm a summer baby. July 26th. I always brag about July 26th being, the same, because, I was born in 63, same birthday as Mick Jagger. He's born exactly 20 years before me. But it's also Stanley Kubrick's birthday.
Oh, wow.
So now I got to figure out what year Stanley Kubrick was born, so I can really figure out how many years older than me Stanley was.
That's great. Yeah, I'm a summer baby too. I was June 5th, so.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, see, summer's a good time. So we're gonna dig into Sweet Movie, which how do we come upon Sweet Movie, Josh? How did we come upon that movie?
You suggested it, yeah.
Okay.
I'd seen it like a few months ago, and I've seen some other movies by Dušan, but you reached out to me and you said, would you like to talk about Sweet Movie? And I love Sweet Movie. I think it's just something kind of like extraordinary in like art cinema world. It's something that it's like very hard to replicate, or hasn't really been done much since, like on that scale.
Yeah, I think so. There's this thing called the Yugoslav Black Wave, of which Dušan Makavejev, the filmmaker behind Sweet Movie, is responsible for. He's also known for WR Mysteries of the Organism, not Mysteries of the Orgasm, which you might think it is, but it's very close because he's certainly orgasm centric. This guy.
I think it's probably deliberate there.
Yeah.
I think,
and it has a lot to do with Wilhelm Reich. Mm-hmm. Do you know anything about Wilhelm Reich?
Yeah, I've read parts of his most famous book, The Mass Psychology of Fascism, and I kind of know him through Makavejev, and he has this kind of crazy like ergonomic theory, and he loved his kind of basic idea, as far as I know, is that that man is like inhibited by like sexual repression and like fascism. The core of fascism is sexual repression, and that like we need kind of like orgasms, and that if people just orgasm more, then fascism and repression and totalitarianism will just kind of go away.
Kind of hard to argue with that, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
If everybody's just coming all the time, then you're probably not going to
Yeah.
be. You're not going to be telling people you must do this. We're going to set up this authoritarian regime that's going to tell you what's what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I see nothing wrong with just unlimited orgasms.
Yeah, how could you? I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of indisputable. I mean, I think when you get right down to it, we live in such a puritanical country,
Mhm.
and now it seems like the world's turning that way too.
Yeah.
As you know, it used to be that America was the most puritanical, but I wouldn't say the most, because certainly people are getting caned in certain countries for being a lesbian or something.
Yeah. 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 I mean, today in India, gay sex is now illegal.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I did not get that memo.
Yeah. Yeah. It just happened. So.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a milestone. That's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like 600 million people. Yeah.
Wow. And that's been a big no-no for a long time. Interesting. All right. Well, this movie gets it. It's streaming on Filmstruck. I watched it again on Filmstruck. I own the DVD. I did a video essay about it, and so let's get into the movie a little bit. It sets itself up as a female-centric movie because the two primary characters are women, and so let's talk about that a little. What you got?
Yeah. I mean, so it kind of has these two storylines. One, which is kind of very kind of farcical. I found it kind of like Python-esque in like,
Oh, I like that. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
That's a good connection. That's a really good connection. Yeah, I think I have always thought of it as being kind of John Waters
yeah.
connected, just because he's so transgressive, and this movie's very transgressive. But I think that Monty Python's very transgressive too.
Yeah, and it's very kind of like farcical, because I mean, it opens in this kind of like gynecology, like a game show kind of gynecology exam, you know, where they're kind of trying to find like the best virgin for Mr. Capital. You know, this kind of really rich Canadian, like I think he's an oil man or milkman or whatever he is.
It's hilarious that he's Canadian, because you would think he's Texan.
Yeah.
Right? But he's Canadian.
Yeah.
So Makavejev already, he's scribbling outside of the lines. He's all over the place with the crayons. Yeah.
Yeah. But so they're kind of trying to find the perfect virgin for him to take as a wife, because he kind of, as he says, he wants to optimize his time and not, he needs to have sex, but he wants to do it as efficiently as possible and not have to kind of waste time with STDs and whatever. Yeah, he's kind of...
Yeah, he's really into cleanliness.
Yeah.
He's like super in... when he finally gets her, he's got to bathe her and everything.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't really want her.
Yeah, he just pees on her.
Yeah, right. Yes, well, with the golden penis.
With his golden penis, yeah.
Which, if anyone ever had this thing, you've heard this thing about like you can't pee with a hard on. Well, there it is.
Yeah, but it's quite extreme in that sense.
I'm trying to get the actor's name. Is it John Vernon?
John Vernon is Mr. Capital.
And he's so ha-ha. He's a very ha-ha actor in this role. He's perfect for that. Yeah. And so what I like about the way that Makavejev is taking on these stereotypes of capitalism and revolution, and he has the ship that Anna Planeta. She's because she's this free sex, the symbol of free sex, and so she can't. They won't. She's an outlaw. She's a sex outlaw, right?
Yeah.
And so she has this boat, and she's traveling through the rivers of Amsterdam, and it's got Karl Marx head on the face on the front of the boat, giant head with this tear coming down from his left eye. It's really just a couple of bags of water making the tear. And so Makavejev, he's taking on capitalism and communism in equal parts.
Yeah.
He's not taking any prisoners. He's really, throwing arrows at everyone, at the communists, at the Nazis, at America, at Canada, at consumerism. And so let's get into Anna Planeta and her virginal counterpart, because he's also playing with the Madonna whore complex, where you've got the one creature who's admired for her virginity, and the other creature who is this hardcore leftist. She's the revolutionary. She's the exemplar of free love and all of the ideals that were coming up. What year is this movie?
74.
74. It feels earlier than that.
Yeah,
It feels like more 68.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what I thought when I was kind of surprised when I saw that it was 74. I thought it was maybe like 69 or something right after.
Yeah.
Especially it kind of resembles in its kind of structure, like kind of some Godard movies of the time, like Masculine, Feminine, or Two or Three Things I Know About Her. And it kind of it's kind of crazy. It kind of can be kind of all over the place and kind of cutting between these different storylines and this kind of documentary footage. These kind of different kind of anecdotes and yeah.
It's a very female-centric movie. I don't know if it would be identified as a feminist film.
Yeah, I don't know either. I think it's kind of too far to be
the satire is too extreme.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's more of just a anti every kind of form of oppression film. Not necessarily feminist or communist, but it's more just kind of going after all kind of structures and all kind of kind of ways of thinking that inhibit us or kind of kind of shut down our sexuality or our kind of way of expressing ourselves.
Yeah, and Anna, how do you pronounce her last name? Do you know how to pronounce her last name?
No, I don't actually.
She plays the Anna Planeta character, the free love character, and she suffered personally after making this movie because the movie was banned. We'll get into some of the reasons that this movie's been banned in a lot of countries. I originally saw it in San Francisco at the Roxy back in the late 80s, I think, maybe very early 90s, and she was banned from visiting. I don't know if she she was exiled from her country.
Yeah, from Poland. Yeah, they tore up her passport. Yeah, she couldn't go back, or
she couldn't visit her mom when her mom was dying and stuff. And she really suffered hardship over this movie. And I think that this movie is important for a lot of reasons. And anytime that somebody creates a work of art and then is punished for it, I think that's the biggest crime. To punish somebody for creating art. Yeah. I don't care how transgressive it is. At a certain point, no animals were harmed. Well, maybe they were. I don't think so. But you know what I mean.
Yeah, maybe some children.
All right, so there is the children's scene. All right, so that's the reason. Especially, I think it was banned in the UK. They had a real problem with the seduction scene of Anna Planeta. And these two boys. I don't know if they're brothers, supposed to be brothers. Yeah. But they come on the ship.
Yeah, and
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and she takes them to kind of her giant candy shop.
Everything's covered with candy.
Yeah, and there's a kind of giant bed of sugar in the middle. It's kind of the kind of sweet part of the title there, but and she does a big striptease for them, and it's very shocking, just because it's just not something that you can really see, it's something that feels very kind of outside of what's allowed within films or art or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it happens. There's a scene like that in the 10 Drum too. The 10 Drum.
Yeah.
And that scene. There's an interview. If you watch this movie on Filmstruck, there's an interview with Dušan Makavejev where he talks about the scene, and he talks about how there was this agreement with the cameraman and with the crew that, hey, if anything you feel like something's not right, we'll stop. Mm-hmm. And that's how they filmed it. And he took it from this attitude of seduction, mm-hmm. and how everyone in life animals are always trying to seduce you. If you have a cat, the cat's going to come over and rub on your leg, and hey, notice me, pet me, mm-hmm. And that's it's a behavior that everyone exhibits towards other humans and to animals and vice versa and all this stuff. And there's no egregious touching or anything. It's really more of this striptease, and one of the kids, she has these gloves and she takes them off. One of the kids putting on the glove. And it's more of a, I don't know. It's more of just a joyfulness. Mm-hmm. It's just a joyfulness of human expression, and it contrasts very much with another scene that we should talk about with the Auto Mule commune that comes into it. So you want to set up the Auto Mule stuff for us a little bit?
In the kind of parallel storyline with the Miss Canada, the kind of virginal character, she kind of goes on a series of adventures, and she ends up in this commune, the Auto Mule commune, which is this real commune from the 70s to the 90s.
Also very inspired by the Wilhelm Reich mm-hmm. ideas. Yeah. And Auto Mule had been a soldier in World War II, and come out of it and had this whole very fierce, I guess it was a rejection of all that. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, go on.
Yeah, and so she kind of goes to this commune, and it's the Auto Mule commune, and they're kind of eating a big meal, and then it's, at first it's kind of like maybe normal, they're just eating with their hands, but then they start spitting food into each other's faces, they're puking everywhere, one guy takes out his cock, he starts peeing over all the food, another guy starts drinking it up. It just becomes excessively kind of gross and bodily, and just kind of every sort of fluid that you can imagine. There's castration.
So let's get down to the castration. It's hilarious in a very googly moogly way. Mm-hmm. And there's a movie with Depardieu. I think it's called The Woman. Have you seen that movie where he chops off his penis with an electric knife at the end of the movie?
No, I think I've heard of it.
It's disturbing, mm-hmm. really disturbing. It's this whole crazy take on equality and feminism. I don't know. It's a bizarre movie. I have to see it again. It'd actually be a great movie for the podcast. But so what happens is this guy whips out this giant. It's not a salami, but it's
mm-hmm.
it's
like a tongue.
It's a very loosely wrapped beef product out of his shorts, out of his boxer shorts, and then he takes a knife and he starts chopping it off, and he's passing it along to everybody, and for some reason it's a very disturbing sequence that it's shocking. Mm-hmm. It's shocking.
Yeah, but it's very uncomfortable as well, because of the fact that it's kind of a piece of meat and not supposedly part of his actual anatomy. It's kind of weird watching it, because you're not kind of sure what if you're supposed to just be purely disgusted and revolted at this, or I don't know. I find I find it kind of challenging in a way, where I wasn't just purely uncomfortable, but almost morbidly fascinated, because it was kind of like an effigy. It wasn't.
It's very theatrical, mm-hmm.
and
I think that's the thing about the commune, is that everyone's acting very theatrically. So you could easily imagine that this group of people living in this commune could be a troupe of actors for Fassbender, for example. Mm-hmm. They're just living on the edge, they're a transgressive. Their mission in life is to be as transgressive as they can. Mm-hmm. It's total free. It's in the age of free love, which I don't think millennials even have any context for what that was. Mm-hmm. So just for a little historical reference, before 1969, when the whole Cultural Revolution really collapsed, I think at Altamont, that was the thing that kind of killed the 60s, was the Rolling Stones performance at Altamont. And there's a great documentary by the Maysles brothers that captures that moment.
Yeah, Give Me Shelter.
Give Me Shelter. And but before that time, there was this counter-revolutionary movement that was, the atmosphere was really one of complete abandon. And so these people are living in that context, and they're having fun. There's nothing mean about any of it. It's not like anyone's trying to one up anybody or whatever. People are doing freaky shit because that's what you do, and that's what people expect. And then it gets as freaky as possible. But he includes this. Makavejev includes this balm, if you will, to the whole episode that this castration episode that we've just witnessed, which really flies in the face of authoritarian nature and phallic symbols in general. My wife and I did a staycation at the Renaissance in Times Square a couple weeks ago. And I realized I'm so uncomfortable in high-rises. I could never live in a high-rise. I don't understand people who live in high-rises. I had a nightmare where I thought that the building was falling down while I was staying there. It was not a comfortable experience for me. And so I think that this thing where the guy takes out this fake meat product to start slicing it up and handing it around, I think if only Donald Trump would do that. I've stretched the metaphor as far as it'll go. But what happens is then the woman next to him takes out his real penis, which is of course very soft and whatever, and she's massaging it, and that heals the damage that this exploitative metaphor that we just experienced. And that is the nature of transgression. If you're going to say, okay, so who are the transgressive filmmakers? You're going to talk about people like David Lynch and of course John Waters and Dušan Makavejev and other people in the Yugoslav Black Wave. And by the way, can you think of other Yugoslav Black Wave filmmakers?
Zelmer Zelilnik is the only other one that I know. But
okay.
I mean, I've I don't know too much about it, but yeah.
And what did he do?
He did this. I've only seen one movie by him, but it's this short film where he invited 10 homeless people into his apartment, and had them live there for a week, and then kick them out. but it became a very controversial. It was a documentary and kind of documentary performance art, but it became very controversial because people called him cruel. They were like, "Why would you do that? Why would you bring these people into your house and then kick them out?" But then he kind of said, well, why don't you do that? If everyone did that, why is it better to kind of just leave them on the street than put them at your house for a week?
What's that movie called?
I actually don't know the name off the top of my head.
All right, we'll have to look it up.
Yeah, but it's it's very interesting. He also did a movie called Early Works, which is about the.
And what's his name?
Zelmer Zilnik. Yeah. And he did a movie called Early Works, which is about kind of 3 students studying the early works of Marx, and it's kind of like a love story, but they're also it's a lot about kind of political movement and them kind of trying to search for meaningful political action. But yeah, I want to see that, but I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought it up because I did not know anything about him. He looks like such a great guy. He's got a great smile. I'm looking at his page on Wikipedia. For listeners out there, it's Zelmer Zilnik, Zeli Zelimer, Zelimir Zilnik. Look that dude up, yeah, because that's cool. So I want to get back into I took. By the way, I should just talk about the context that I saw this movie at the Roxy when I saw it in San Francisco. And I was dating this girl who had escaped from communist Romania. And so she had saved up enough money. Her family had saved up enough money in the 80s. This is during the Ceausescu reign of terror. And so she had saved up enough money because it was all black market. You had to pay off everybody. And so she escaped communist Romania with nothing but a photo. And we went to see this movie together in San Francisco. And when it got to the sugar scene, on the boat, there was something really joyful about it. It's the most, because, all right, so we just set up the scene a little bit about Planeta, because she's on this boat and it has it's filled with all this candy and sugar, and there's this great, it's a cradle. It's like a cradle, a gigantic cradle of sugar. And Pierre Clemente, is that his name?
Yeah.
The actor.
Yeah.
Pierre Clemente, famous for Belle de Jour. He's the gangster in Belle de Jour who seduces Catherine Deneuve. And Catherine Deneuve, even though you wouldn't expect it, she's of course all about the bad boy, and he plays the bad boy so great in that movie. But he's forewarned that if he makes love to Anna Planeta, because she's a leftist, she's a revolutionary, and as we know, the fate of all revolutionaries is that they're gonna die. And so if he makes love to her, because that's what she does, she kills everybody that she makes love to.
Yeah. But yeah, getting back to the kind of sweet scene, it's kind of like the most kind of notable or like kind of like iconic scene of the movie of her like in front of all these kids. And I don't know, I found it I found it very kind of seductive. Like, it was kind of like pleasant to watch, but in a very uncomfortable way, and I think that's what this film was great at doing, is that kind of like really just kind of like always like kind of pushing you and to like kind of think about like where, like how you can enjoy it and where you kind of like where you can just kind of like easily watch it. And
where cinema draws the line, right? Because I mean, we all, you grow up with your family, you see your mom and your dad naked, they see you naked, whatever, but you don't see that in cinema. I don't think that there's ever been a movie where they show like, oh, dad and mom are walking around the house naked.
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't do that. You couldn't do that. It happens every day, but you can't show that on screen.
Yeah, and it's also it's also interesting because it kind of like there's this kind of like aspect of like kind of childhood sexuality to it, but the children are just kind of there, they're just kind of empty spectators, where she's being very sexual, and kind of like as an audience you kind of like identify with the children, if anything, so it kind of it kind of brings you back, to this kind of like when you watch it, you kind of feel like almost like wide-eyed, like it has this kind of mystery to it. It has this kind of you kind of can kind of.
Well, maybe it's their first lesson in sex education, right? You could think of it that way. I mean, I don't know if you had sex ed in high school. I always hear about people who like had sex ed. I went to an alternative high school. I never had sex ed, so I was just. What's the? I can't remember the name of the. What's the book that has all the studies of all the sexual behavior?
I don't know.
That they made a television show out of it. Whatever the hell that thing was.
Yeah.
I was like reading that shit for like like what it is. So yeah, I think if you think about it that way, it's like, okay, so and this kind of I also think gives the ending of the movie great credence too. I really like the ending of the movie. But yeah, I mean, maybe what she's doing is just giving them like their first sex ed class.
Yeah, I agree. And I think he's also. I think he's trying to like challenge us to see it not as just like to see it kind of without any preconceptions, to kind of see like the sexuality just as this kind of like pure expression of sweetness without kind of being like, oh, this is right or this is wrong. I mean, he's kind of, because, I mean, kind of female sexuality gets so heavily kind of coded, and we see a naked woman and we kind of have so many like preconceived ideas of like what she is, how we feel about her, what, if she's attractive. But, through the eyes of these children, like, they've never, had sex, so like, what do they think, how can they go to this, and it's interesting in relation to the Otto Mule commune, because in the commune they kind of act like babies, they're like, there's a scene where one of them is kind of rolling on a bed like as a baby, and they're powdering him and he's peeing everywhere, and it's kind of, they kind of show like kind of adults kind of striving towards infantilism. They're kind of trying to be
infantilism.
Yeah, infantilism. They're trying,
which Hollywood is caught up with very well with superhero movies. I mean, that, and I would say that the problem with superhero movies, as opposed to movies in the 70s, like Serpico and Dog Day Afternoon or whatever, there was always sexuality in those. There's no sexuality in superhero movies.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're looking at, because that's where Hollywood thinks kids should be looking, and there's nothing but violence in those movies.
Yeah.
You look at a movie like Black Panther, and like the ritual that they keep going back to is this battle that they have to that. How is that good?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's kind of, I personally kind of really don't like superhero movies because, I mean, no romance, no character. Yeah, just kind of like infinite, like kind of war, Infinity War. But yeah, it's kind of it's interesting and like kind of like interesting genre for kind of like the war on terror. For like kind of our era of like the war on terror, where it's just like this kind of like infinite battle. And that's kind of like all we get. It's not like the kind of classical days of Hollywood where you have like Casablanca, where there's like war and there's romance, and there's kind of this like there's this kind of like intrigue, this kind of like idea of being swept up in history and kind of having these like kind of trying to find oneself like in the historical struggle and kind of like make an impact, but in superhero movies everyone's already a hero and they're just like fighting the whole time.
Yeah. So I mean, there's no question that it's a provocative scene, but it's a joyful scene, and it's not. There's no cruelty, and also there, there's no touching either. It's not like somebody's trying to, push something.
Yeah.
Some adult agenda on the kids. It's more a matter of nudity is something that can be celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
It's a festive. It's a little party. It's a little party atmosphere, and there's no, it's not like the conclusion is that anybody got touched or anybody told somebody something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have experiences in life. I've had a couple things. I mean, we all have things that happen to us. With people. I was a member of this. I'm just going to bust it out because I hate fucking Asphalt Green. I'm just going to tell you some shit about Asphalt Green. I broke up with Asphalt Green. That was my gym for a long time, down on York. And, I swam there. I'm a big swimmer. I love swimming. And they started doing this thing where, like, every summer, instead of building a pool outside of the, like, having like a separate pool, because they can do it. They can build an exterior pool, temporary exterior pool, so they can have summer camp, because they bring in 500 plus kids a day to this pool.
Yeah.
And you're like this normal member who's paying $100 a month to be a member of this pool.
Mm-hmm.
And they do renovations on the men's locker room. Like, they just did it 3 years ago. Somehow they could never clean the sauna. Like, the floor was filthy in the sauna. But the men's locker room's shut down, so you have to share the locker room with all the little naked kids. I'm very uncomfortable like that. Like, that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And then, so the last time that I was there, I would get kicked out of my lane because, of course, the kids, like private lessons or whatever. And then you try and walk out, and then there's like 100 kids that you have to walk past. And kids, by the way, don't walk in a straight line.
Yeah.
So, they're just like, they're going to brush up on you like while you're walking by in your Speedos and stuff. And I had just had enough. And I just think that, I don't know, good and bad stuff. It's all about context, you know. And when you have these experiences in life, I'd walked through, and like the security guy, I guess because I had told one of the lifeguards, right? Like, you guys don't know what you're doing. And so like the security guard comes back with another guy into the locker room while I'm changing. Like I'm there trying to dry my suit. I'm naked. There's these two goons like standing 5 feet away from me. Like we need to talk to you for a minute. And that's why I broke up with the pool, because like what kind of authoritarian shit are you pulling on me? Yeah. It's not appropriate. And so you have these experiences in life on the subway or whatever, and what I realize now for myself personally is, I told them, no, I don't have time for you. I'm going to leave, and I'm never coming back. And that's what I did, because the fact that you're putting your authoritarian goonish persona 10 feet away from me, in a context where I'm nude, fuck you. Yeah. Like that's wrong. Like I can clearly look at that situation and say that's wrong. The situation in Sweet Movie, as the movie pretends, it's about sweetness and joy. And so, I think that people are very quick to judge situations, misjudge situations, and say that, well, that's acceptable for those guys, like the security guys, to come and fuck with you in the locker room, but it's not cool for this woman to, strip in front of these kids. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. Yeah, I mean, I was reading something where they're talking about how, presumably, in order to kind of be okay with this, like, you have to kind of think that, like, these kids have been kind of seduced by a number of things in their lives, that, like, already at this point, like, there's, like, television, there's advertising, there's all of these things which, can kind of already, seduce them. There's, like, kind of, sexuality in all of these ways, which can form them that this, like, one woman, who's kind of this actress who's kind of working with the film crew won't have any greater negative impact than kind of all of the other things in their lives that have already been kind of trying to get them to become a certain way, or teach them a certain thing, or, kind of teach them a certain, like, sexuality, or, So, I mean, I think within that context, it's kind of, like, understandable, and especially given kind of the way it's used in the film and the way, it's able to kind of provoke audiences and kind of, like, make us think and kind of question our own sexualities.
Yeah, and also, the context of the war we were talking before we started recording about how Dušan uses this collage approach, where he puts in this sequence of the Katyn massacre, which is this massacre that happened where the communists massacred all these intellectuals, and then the Nazis went and dug up all the bodies and filmed themselves digging up all the bodies and measuring the bullet wounds on the skulls. It's very gruesome, extremely gruesome, black and white footage. And so, there's the contrast for you right there, because, this is acceptable. The killing was acceptable, and, the massacre was acceptable, and now it's acceptable for the Nazis to come and claim how much better they are than the communists because they didn't do it. And here we are. We're so smart. We're so good. We can look at this. We can show this to you in all of its gruesome affect. And so Makavejev really, by contrasting these different social situations, he crafts something that it really makes you think. It really actively makes you think while you're watching it. Why you're watching it, what are you watching, what's the everything's about context, of course. And so, for something called Sweet Movie, and you're seeing these scenes, what does that add up to?
Yeah. I mean, it's really complicated. Yeah, I mean, another thing I noticed too is that, I mean, the way the kind of that it's this, the kind of way that we kind of feel towards the Katyn massacre footage, this kind of like revulsion. It's very interesting in context with like the Automobile Commune and the way that kind of we find them revolting as well. They're vomiting and they're shitting and they're peeing. It's quite disgusting. But it's like, why are these the kind of two extremes of like people, mass death and like very kind of morbid kind of scene versus this kind of very bodily, very physical, kind of gross scene. Why do they both revolt us? Why is there like this kind of like excess of like life of like the body and this, the kind of the opposite, the excess of death? Why are they on the same plane in our minds? Why why is it only kind of somewhere in the middle that we're comfortable with? How can we kind of reconcile with that death and life both make us uncomfortable?
Yeah, and what's the song? I love the song.
Yeah, is there life on this earth? Is there life after birth?
Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, the music is really cool, and he plays with that musical motif with that song throughout the movie, and of course, I mean, I think we should talk about the end of the movie because it to me it really, I don't know if he was inspired from the 400 Blows, but it does have a little bit of that 400 Blows Truffaut ending. Of course, if you've seen the 400 Blows, the poor kid, he finally escapes, but he knows that shit's coming after him, and the last shot of the 400 Blows, he looks right into the camera, and so the end of this movie, we have these corpses of children that are wrapped in plastic and rope. But they come to life. They come back to life. They're not really dead. Yeah. And the kid looks up out of the he's on the ground and he looks right into the camera, and it's that freeze frame. And I think Makavejev, I think he was inspired by Truffaut for that ending.
Yeah. I mean, that's the 400 Blows, kind of like the like freeze frame. I don't think you can kind of like have a more iconic like kind of final like freeze frame image than that. But yeah, I mean, I find that interesting because that he comes back to life after death, because there's kind of the whole song is there life after birth, So it's kind of, there's this like parallel there where it feels like he's kind of like reborn in a way, like he's kind of coming to life, through this kind of
catharsis.
Yeah, this catharsis that, is like when he's after being on the ship and being like kind of seduced with all these sweets and all this sexuality, kind of.
And then the knife comes down in the sugar.
Yeah.
And the blood comes up in the sugar. It's such a great, it's such a visceral thing, seeing the blood come up in the sugar. And I think that's, it's a good metaphor. I think there's corollaries between this movie and Salo, Pierre Pasolini's Salo, which is also an indictment of capitalism.
Yeah, an interesting fact is that Pasolini actually bought this movie to distribute in Italy, and he dubbed over all the voices. He dubbed the voices. Yeah, so in the Italian version, it's actually Pasolini doing a lot of the characters. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
No one knows that. You're like the only person who knows that. That's incredible. Oh my God, that's great. So listeners out there, you heard it here on the Grande Bouffe first, because I had no idea that Pasolini had any connection to this movie. That's incredible. Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's very interesting in comparison to Salo too, which came out the year after.
Oh, I didn't realize that either. This was the. Oh, wow, they came out that close together. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this, if you haven't seen Salo, I mean, we haven't. I can't believe we haven't talked about it on Le Grande Bouffe. We have to talk about that movie sometime, because it's just such a scathing indictment of capitalism, which this movie is too. But I think this movie is also an indictment of all ideologies, and it's it's very personal. It's about the individual, and I think it celebrates humanity and freedom of expression, and freedom. I think this movie is really about freedom, and what freedom is, and how commodified we all are as commercial entities. Everybody, and especially now with the way data mining has taken over everything. We've all just become, how long is it going to be before we're all just, I mean, I don't even know what it is. You know, your activities are all planned and notated and
like
capitalized
watched
on.
and like everything you're doing is accounted for, and you know, like it's set up for you, and there's kind of like no room to kind of like get out or like reinvent yourself or kind of like discover yourself because like, you know, you kind of have this like identity that's, you know, you've supposedly created but really has been like kind of created for you and in a lot of ways, and you can't really escape from. You know, all of your movements are like tracked really heavily.
Yeah, and so I think you know, it's an interesting aspect of this movie. The power of this film is that it's really ahead of its time, and Salo is too.
Yeah.
And so when you watch this movie in today's context, however many years later, 40 years later or something, that this movie, it's like a protection against what we're in now. You know, I get this pop-up window on my laptop all the time, like, you know, there's a problem, you can't connect to the cloud. Well, fuck you, I don't want to be connected to the goddamn cloud.
Yeah, I agree,
asshole. Like, and why are you sent? Why do I always have this pop-up message about being connected to the? I never said that you could look in my computer. You know, I don't want to be part of the cloud. I don't even know what the fucking cloud is. I just know the FBI has their fingers in it. You know, like all authoritarian and capitalist, you know, machinery has their fingers in that. I don't want anything to do with that. And so I think that this movie is it's a great balm to. It's like a corrective to all that stuff, because you do experience a catharsis. It's a very cathartic movie, and the stuff that happens that challenges you with the golden penis, you know, where the guy, like, his idea of sex is to is to pee on the girl. You know, like, that's it.
I mean, talking about Trump, that's I think, you know, the supposedly the dossier, you know, the PP tape as they call it, that supposedly exists out there.
The corollaries are certainly there, and this guy is a total Trumpian character. I mean,
Mr. Capital is his name.
You would swear that, you know, he's Trump's cousin. You know, I miss the old days when it was Carter, and he had like Billy, his cousin or whatever, brother, that was like the beer drinking asshole. You know, and so you could go, well, that guy, you know, he's got his cross to bear. Now we all have the cross to bear. But yeah, I think that Sweet movie is it's transgressive and radical, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that should be embraced, and I think that society's coming around to this idea. It's been so long since there's been any leftist anything. You know, everyone treats, and, you know, FYI, you know, when people say leftist, you know, that's code for what? Equality? I mean, that's what it's code for.
Like progressive thinking.
That when somebody talks about, like, oh, you know, that's leftist thinking, you know, that's communist thinking. That's equality. That's what we're talking about. Equality. You got a problem with that? You know, because then I got a problem with you. You know, because you're the guy who wants to have, like, you know, 99.9% of the pie, and I get some little tiny pebble. Not even a crumb. I get a fucking pebble. You know. So anyway, well, thank you so much for coming on the program, Josh. I
thank you for having me.
Appreciated you sharing your thoughts about Sweet Movie. And I encourage anybody, certainly if you have Filmstruck, check out Sweet Movie. And if you don't have Filmstruck, get Filmstruck and check it out. And please remember to turn off your cell phones all the time, because it's a good thing. Leave them at home as much as you can. Definitely don't drive around with them. And if you have any inclination to helping this podcast keep going, please visit colesmithy.com, where you can contribute through Patreon as little as $5 a month. It really helps keep the lights on. Thank you all so much for listening. And thanks, Josh.